Good day to you from Anagalactic, and we are currently in a series which we want to express as a continuation of the prior video, and in fact this goes back all the way to the beginning of my work, which is in geometry. And we are, as you can see from this diagram over here, into geometry. But far more than that. Geometry is the source of understanding. Mathematics is not. Mathematics is a tool of geometry. Why? Because we don't see numbers. We see shapes. We see things. Such as, for instance, particles, which we think we can see. Well, that's been challenged. And you've heard of the wave-particle duality. Well, that's quite a conundrum. We need to break that spell. It's holding up science. We're not getting anywhere. We haven't for a century. So really everything stopped in 1900. And of course technology went on. We don't want technology. That's not what science does. It's an offshoot of science. But science is about human existence. It's about reality. It's about consciousness. It's about controlling your life, both internally and externally. Now, externally, you have to be careful. There is such a thing as morality. You're not alone. You're not independent. And you're certainly not the king. You're not the prince. You're not God. And so you have to live with other human beings. Well, that's a problem. And that's the main problem that we face. Not quite. It's related to the main problem, which is death. And that's quite an interesting prospect. Your existence as such is going to cease. Well, what does that do to you? It makes you think. You have to think. And that's Islam. Just so you know what Islam is, which I doubt that you do, that's what it is. It's a rational approach to the supernatural. Now, we don't want to go right into the pulpit and start thumping on Bibles and Qurans and, manuscripts that go back that nobody can trust. We don't want to do that. We're not going to pass the plate to get your fucking wallet to support our cause, which is probably racist. All religions, except for Islam, are racist. Now, we all know these things, but it's very, very difficult to deal with. You still have to make a living. You have to grub for money like an animal. You have to feed your face, your fat ass. You have to have pleasure. But it's all going to come to an end, to a grinding halt, as it does for, several million people a day. Their lives are just grinding to a halt in the Gaza Strip, where people don't matter because they're animals, because people like Israelis just don't seem to get along with other humans, because they have a religious vector which dominates their minds, so they're no longer human. Now, you and I would like to remain human, but we would also like to remain human for as long as possible. Well, you don't need to worry about that, because science has proved that your consciousness is eternal. And that's really a problem for us, all of us, because that doesn't look good. Once you lose your body, what are you going to be? Nobody knows. Well, nobody knows in science because nothing can be proved. So we're not going to go there because you hate it. It would turn you off. You would go crazy. You would hate me. You would probably try to kill me or hire someone to kill me. Maybe not today, but 1,000 years ago, I'd be dead by now. Because I deal with the supernatural. Why? Because it's the enclosing space of the natural. That's been discovered and we all know it. It's at the quantum limit and it's at the cosmological limit. There's supernatural space. But that's not how we construe supernatural. So today, we're going to get right back down to brass tacks. Not mess around with guys like Bernardo Kastrup, who's an Eastern mystic, so am I. So we're all indicted. Nobody gets out of this. You're a hypocrite, there's no way out of that. You're a sinner. And now Molly's going to pass the plate. Put your wallet in there or we'll come to your house because you're an infidel. We'll burn down your house and eat your puppy. You see, this is what has gone on for 6,000 years in every corner of the world, except somehow life goes on. I appear to be healthy. I have white skin, so I'm privileged. God only knows why I was born with white skin and was born in second half of the 20th century, unbelievably prosperous America. Why am I privileged? How come I'm not dying of starvation in the Gaza Strip? These questions simply can't be answered by a rational man. You'll lose your mind, as I did. You'll become a religious fanatic, as I did. You'll end up becoming a missionary to Ukraine. You'll fly there 5 times, something equivalent. That's what I did. I gave sermons in Yalta. I gave sermons in Kiev in the years 1998, 1999, 2000, 2001. Then I went back in 2006, and I went back one last time in 2009. After that, I could not go back, because the writing was on the wall. It was just 5 years from the Orange Revolution. This was a NATO operation, of course, spearheaded, as always, by the United States to attack Russia. And now Ukraine is being used to attack Russia. And Putin has been forced to defend Russia. And of course, that makes him the enemy. But the much worse situation, far worse, is the attack on the people of God. The true Christians of the earth are being slaughtered. The only people who actually believe in the one true prophet, against whom all the other prophets are simply his servants. And of course I speak of Yeshua. But we're not going to go there. I cannot interest you in that because you've been brainwashed. Your mind is closed, it's going to stay closed. And so I'm simply going to introduce our geometric series with what both Yeshua, that means Jesus Christ, both Yeshua and Muhammad, who's the head of the Christians now, they're the replacements for the Christian people, who never were Christian, they're fake. And the Islam people are real, they're actual Christians. They do believe in Yeshua. But what's the big difference that makes the Islam people hated by the false Christians? Why are the true Christians hated by the false Christians? It's because the true Christians, who are in Iran and over 40 other nations, there are 2 billion true Christians. They don't call themselves Christians because they know what Christianity is in the West, and they want nothing to do with it. And so the Christian countries, such as America and Israel is the greatest of the false Christian nations, because it's actually carrying out the will of God, they say. A very strange situation, that the true Christians are being attacked. All 2 billion of them will be exterminated by Israel. But Israel can't do much because it's so small. Now, we don't want to go there. You're not interested in world politics. You're interested in your puppy, your shithole music, and listening to bullshit artists who talk about pseudoscience, so that you'll just have something to do before you die. And I have to repeat, I'm forced to do this. I serve heaven, and I have to do what heaven tells me. If you don't like that, you pack your fanny pack right up your fanny and take your fanny to the nearest cliff, remove your fanny pack from your fanny, toss it off the cliff, and dive after it. And then you'll find the secret of reality. No other way for you. I am forced to tell you what Muhammad said, which he learned from Yeshua, who of course learned it from Allah, his father. And all of this is true and real, but you couldn't care less, but I have to do my duty. You're going to have to pity me, or hate me, which is what most people do. In Ukraine, they did not hate me. They welcomed me as a diplomat, they loved me, they took me into their homes, they protected me against the CIA and against Ovir, and even though I was detained at the airport, I learned some things from my spycraft to get out of that nasty situation, and I flew out of Ukraine and actually returned. So I know what I'm doing in this world. Do you? I don't know. But I'm not here to preach to you. I'm simply protecting myself. All you have to do is recognize supernatural love and admit it. But you won't. And so I'm forced to tell you, you're going to hell. And you're going there very soon, because this earth only has at the most. I have to hedge my bet here because I'm not a visionary prophet. But I do succeed in that line of exposing the truth of heaven, the way of Islam. How to get to God. How you can return to God. It's the easiest thing in the world, but you're too stupid, you're retarded, you're brainwashed. So I don't want to mess with your mind. That's 10 minutes. So I'm going to stop. I've done my duty. And now I'm going to show you a video that I made over 3 years ago. I've been doing this for 4 years. I've produced over 1,600 videos on science. Actually on geometry, which is the only form of science. Everything else is government controlled. And if you don't know that, it's because you're retarded. And I'm just telling you, as a man to another man, you're fucked in the head. If you think technology is going to save you in any way, you've been taken in by the greatest deception of all time. Except that religious one that I just happened to mention, and I hope it didn't confuse you. I know it did. Because you're confused. But if you use your rational mind correctly, you'll make it. Islam supports rational logic. Christianity does not. So what's the difference between the true people of Christ, who are the Islam people? They're the new Israelis. They're the people of God. Well, the false ones are really jealous and they want to murder them all. And they're doing so in the Gaza Strip, on the West Bank, and they're trying to get them in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Iran. These are all Islam nations being attacked by a European band of psychopathic murderers. Funded by the United States, that's called the Beast, but oh God, I don't want to confuse you. So this is to introduce a video I made about 3.5 years ago. It was in January of 2023. It's not very long, but it talks about Bošković, which is where we're at. And this diagram that you see up here is about Bošković. Those are computer-generated images of the Bošković curve system, of which I am the accredited master because it leads to the unified field solution, the quantum of gravity, and the collapse of the wave function. Also the definition of consciousness. We're getting into the Bernardo Kastrup framework. He follows up on Carl Jung. These are the early pioneers in the true cutting edge of science, which is for rational understanding of supernaturality, which of course encompasses the realm of prophecy, heaven, Yeshua, Muhammad, things that you don't understand and never will because you don't want to, and you'll die of it. I've done my duty. We're now going to go back to pure geometry, and I hope you are able to coordinate the two aspects of what we all have to do, because you have a rational logical side, which is meant to convince you that God exists, which it has. It's just that you hate God. Sorry, but I'm required to say that. And the other side is love. That is your emotional side. But it also includes hatred. Which one did you choose? You had no choice. Your government told you to hate. Your religion told you to hate. Islam does not do that. It accepts rational logic, it accepts the proof of monotheism, and it accepts all prophets, including Confucius, even the Buddha, and of course the Plains Indians medicine men, whom we so much respect in this free nation, where we respect our ancestors who were here first. No, we're all Israelis. Was I? No, I woke up. But so can you. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll be back with more baffling information that you'll never be able to digest because you're lazy, retarded, and I could say a lot of other bad things. You need to repent. And you can read a book on how to repent. It's by a man named Al-Ghazali, and he's a direct follower of Muhammad. He lived 950 years ago. The book that he wrote is called, look it up, and you'll find that you can rationally get out of your trap so that you can be happy again. It's called The Alchemy of Happiness. It's a condensation of one of the most revered books ever produced by the human race, which is called The Revival of Religious Science. Some Islam people have read it all the way through numerous times. It's a 4-volume set. It's been translated into English more than once. You're not allowed to know about it because of your false Christian masters who are now murderous thieves and always have been since the beginning of time. But you can get out. That's called the good news. I hope you enjoy this. Thank you so much for putting up with me. I'm extremely elliptical. We'll be right back. Galactic, bringing you another science presentation in geometry. Our intent in these lectures is to get at the cutting edge of physics. We've narrowed that down in previous lectures to two cutting edges, looking at it rather abstractly. Of course, there are always several cutting edges in science because of branch sciences which have independent work. Geology, biology, for instance. However, our sole directive is toward heaven, certainly not ruling out any other part of science. The earth sciences are part of the universe, since the earth is part of the universe. But we're primarily interested in what used to be called heaven or the heavens. The most common term would be the universe, what I would prefer to call the cosmos with a capital C, for the same reason that we used to call the Milky Way the galaxy with a capital G. It's the one that we're in. And the biggest of the things that we're in would be the biggest of the cosmoses, if you think of organized structure, macrostructure in the universe, as something deserving of a name. There actually is a name. They're called cosmoses. And that can be extended all the way down to the smallest macroscale unit. We think of that as a planet. You can go lower. There are moons of planets, and in fact, Earth has a moon, the first planet going out from the sun that has a moon. We have quite a system here on Earth. It's an entire system all in itself. Each planet is, of course, but so far we haven't found any other planets that have an ecology of life. An ecology which in our definition, as a life form on Earth, which human beings are, it's an ecology of life. Well, it's unique as far as we can tell, but of course our instinct is to reach out and to see. The SETI program and every human being faces this, I would say, perhaps hope or suspicion or wonder about if there are other intelligences. It is, of course, quite logical to think so, but science is only interested in what can be proved. So even though we may be interested even in extending our own concept of life, a life ecology into the universe, many books have been written about this. It's a never-ending source of interest. It certainly is not strictly a modern phenomenon to be considering if there are, in fact, extraterrestrial life forms. Even can get emotional, and I think each one of us feels this split in our own heart, that we want so much to believe that there is other intelligent life form in the universe. I certainly believe that that is a rational thought, but in science, of course, we're not really interested in anything that is an opinion. And you would have to say that it is an opinion, although science does have much to say about the nature of intelligence in the universe. It is not just obvious and not just a philosophical certainty, but a scientifically rational proposition that is a discovery that there is, in fact, such a thing as superintelligence. That's a far cry from what any typical human being would think of in terms of finding another life form. A life form, we really haven't got much experience with life forms. We're only acquainted with life forms on Earth. But that's our introduction, the bracketing information that I always like to include. This time under 5 minutes, I've set a new record. But the date of Bošković, his discoveries, his lifetime. But this man, Roger, It's Roger in English, it's Ruđer in Croatian, and I again checked with a Croatian man tonight. But you'll see that Roger lived on the Adriatic Sea right across from Milan. A beautiful place from what I've been told. The Adriatic Sea is no one's idea of a dirty bathtub, or really, I tried to go there, but I ended up going to Turkey instead, but that's the luck of the dice, you know. By the way, if you believe in good luck, and you should, those are called black swans, and I recommend a book called The Black Swan. It's written by a mathematician, and it's about lucky coincidences, just coincidences. It's a real eye-opener. And my word of advice is, if you do believe in good luck, and I certainly do, they're called black swans, you'll get your share of good luck. You'll also get your share of bad luck. And you have to take them together. If you believe in good luck, well, then daddy-o, be expecting bad luck as well. And it's luck. Now in science, we're not too interested in luck. The reason I'm bringing all this up is Roger Joseph Bošković was a real human man, of course, but I just wanted to say a couple of things about him, although I don't like talking about humans. Obviously I do. And it is because this guy's something else. He was you'll see highlighted here, the University College of the Society of Jesus in Vienna. Well, he was a Catholic, I don't know if most at that time. I don't know that much about the Catholic religion or politics of it, but it was widespread in Europe at that time, no question. So he was a Catholic. In other words, that was nothing unusual. Today, Catholics, I don't know. I don't understand why anyone would hate anyone who's doing religion. But what I do understand, though, is hatred of a tyranny. And unfortunately, religion just gets involved. But it doesn't really have too much to do with the Catholics themselves. I would just have to put it that way. But however you may think or feel about religion and history and governments, which always get involved, there's money and then warfare, bloodshed, of course it's horrendous. But Bošković was not one of those. He was a scientist who was also a priest. And in modern times we have such a man, maybe the last. I don't know if there have been any since, I can't pronounce French very well, so forgive me, anyone who does pronounce French well, but I believe is Georges Lemaitre. Lemaitre? I don't know exact, but it's Georges Lemaitre is how we say it in American. And he was a priest and a scientist who made quite a significant contribution, as you may very well know. We'll be getting to that eventually. This is our first broadcast in a week. I did have to read Bošković's book, and the link to that I will be showing you if you're interested in reading Bošković's book, Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis, which I think you don't need a translation for that. This here is lifted right from the book. I pasted it in here. Synopsis Totius Operis, if I'm saying that right in Latin. The book that you can get as a free download. It's amazing how much information of this. If you were to buy that book, well, it would depend on, you might be able to buy it for, you would have to buy it normally. Well, this book you don't have to buy, and I'm very, very good at getting books for free. If I think if other people feel, I don't know who these people are, but God bless this motion. I mean, to be able to read this book, which was written in Latin, men back then of Bošković's prominence, as is still common today, they spoke more than one language, and two was just not even uncommon. 3 and 4 was not uncommon. 3 and 4, yeah, it depends on a lot, but he spoke at least 4 languages. And that's one reason why we have a bit of a difficult time knowing even how to spell or say his name, because he was well known in French and in Italian, but his native language was Croatian, which is a Slavic language of the southern Slavs. The man was just an amazing man. So be that as it may, that's a little over 15 minutes for our introduction. This will be more than one lecture, but in this lecture, we're going to breeze through that. You may have had time to read this. I have some things highlighted here that I believe are significant. And basically, this is just taken from the openings, like the first 60 pages of the book, which is quite long. But it is printed in both Latin and English. Very well done. And it was done quite a while ago. So we're very, very fortunate to have this. Just as an example, in the field of literature and journalism, we have a Nobel Prize laureate by the name of Alexander Isaievich Solzhenitsyn, who wrote one of the most amazing pieces, and it's literature too. The man was extraordinarily literate, but he was in basically a prisoner of war camp inside of Russia. You may have heard of it, called the Gulag. And these prisoners of war, there's only one war going on. The war of communism against its own people. Unbelievable. Unbelievable story. But my point being that when I was in Kiev, I had already read every single thing that Alexander Solzhenitsyn had ever written. And his book, The Gulag Archipelago, I read twice. 1 2/3 times. Because it's such an unbelievably amazing story and the way he writes it. But my point is, he then wrote a book, a 2-volume book, which I got from a bookseller in Kiev, a 2-volume book by Solzhenitsyn, who already had become a Nobel Prize laureate. And the book he wrote was called 200 Years Together. And whatever it's about, who cares? Buy it and read it because it's by Solzhenitsyn. It's never been translated into English to this day. And I could tell you some more things about that, but I tried to take it home with me, and I did. I took this 2-volume book in Russian by Solzhenitsyn because I was going to translate it. I was going to either translate it or find someone who could help me or someone who would do it. Because a 2-volume book by a Nobel Prize laureate, one of the only men able to speak about what happened under Stalinism. Not very many men and women got a chance to write anything about one of the most important chapters in human history, certainly from a human point of view. The enslavement of 100 million people. The enslavement of 100 million Russians. And the extermination along the way in the tens of millions, definitely in the tens of millions of exterminated people under communism. And that's not counting Eastern Europe, which was entirely under the control of this ruthless organization. What Solzhenitsyn wrote about were the perpetrators of that atrocity. And that's the Gulag Archipelago, Nobel Prize winning book in literature for excellent reason. But then he wrote a more important book, a much more important book. It was about the experience of the Jews in Ukraine. The experience of the Jews before the Russian Revolution, and he called it 200 Years Together. The Jews lived in Ukraine. The Jews did. That's where you get Fiddler on the Roof. It's not very well taught in American history that the Jews lived in Ukraine, which means they lived in Russia. They still do. The Jews and Russia and Ukraine are extremely intimately connected. extremely intimately connected. And you'll never ever find that out. You'll never know that, and you should forget that I said it. Just the illusion that they were so closely related. And Alexander Isayevich is his patronymic. Solzhenitsyn wrote a 2-volume book called 200 Years Together. 200 let vmesti. And it's referring to 200 years of Ukrainian-Russian Jewish collaboration. The existence of the Jews before Lenin. And then came Lenin. And everyone knows what happened then. The greatest mass terrorism in the history of the world outside of the Orient. The world excluding the Orient is the greatest massacre, the greatest atrocity ever to hit the earth. Was the rise of communism in the 20th century. It's responsible for the murder of over 80 million people. In 2 years, communism murdered over 10 million Ukrainian farmers. That was 1 decade before the Holocaust. How come you never heard about that? We're not going there, kids. That's why Alexander Solzhenitsyn's 200 Years Together has never been translated into English. There is something stopping that from being published. My copy of that in Russian was burned up in the campfire. So maybe even heaven doesn't want that published right now. But we're scientists, and what I'm trying to say is, to be able to get hold of Theoria, Philosophiae Naturalis by Roger Josip Bošković, translated at great cost, enormous cost to translate this into English. And now Roger's name is coming back up at cutting-edge mathematics, cutting-edge physics. His name is coming back up. I'm going to show you why. And that's why I get a little bit emotional. To have access to this information to break the deadlock in physics is what we're all trying to do. Find some way to break this logjam. Science is halted. Science is halted. Not here at A&E, it's not halted. So the University College of the Society of Jesus, 1758. Roger Bošković, the most respected name in European science at the time, exceeded only by the artificial reputation of Newton. Newton came before Bošković, and that's the only reason that Newton is remembered, is he was born before Roger Bošković. But unfortunately for poor, self-centered, rather irascible and nasty Sir Isaac Newton, he was a contemporary of Leibniz, and Leibniz beat him to the punch on the calculus. And it just about drove Sir Isaac out of his aristocratic mind. Sir, my ass. He was a coward. And the reason I bring up the name of Leibniz and Newton, which you could think of as one name, they're about the same, is because of their ability to supply Bošković with the information Bošković needed to come up with a geometric solution that surpassed both of them and would never be surpassed by anyone from then to now. And the quantum mechanists, one by one, as they run out of steam and are looking for anything, they've started mentioning Bošković's name recently. There is a strong reason for that. And I'm going to show you in this lecture what Bošković discovered that you're going to want to know, because I'm going to be talking about this and related geometrical issues from now until the summer solstice. There's a history to this production if you're tuning in for the first time. I produced in 2022, from June until Christmas, 250 videos on a discovery sequence that came my way, in which it was empowered by a geometry, which rather went unnoticed, and I just noticed it and explored it for several months, and ended up making what appeared to be several discoveries. The follow-up is to find out just what that can do for science, as I am 100% convinced is going to do an enormous service for science, a geometry that explains paradoxes that are killing science right now. Killing it. Well, I just found out within the past month, although it goes back 3 or 4 months, I first started noticing Bošković in late summer of 2022. But it's only been since Christmas that I started reading his book. And I'm just going to tell you point blank, straight up, right now, over the next 2 to 3 lectures, you are going to hear some of the most incredible discovery information ever revealed to the modern mind of science. It's unbelievable what this man discovered. In geometry, he's talking about physics though, but he talks about it geometrically. I'm going to tell you, I have found already in the first 60 pages of his book, he preempted my discoveries. Not exactly, but because of the geometry that I stumbled upon and was able to prove exists, a spherical geometry, it led to several discoveries in quantum mechanics and in mechanics in general, going all the way to astrophysics. So it turns out it's a unifying geometry for the grand unification theory. It's quite significant. No matter what else, I can definitely say this is not going to go away. But one of the things that I got into was, of course, quantum mechanics, to see if this geometry could address it in any way. Yeah, it sure does. And now Bošković, I found out within the past month, absolutely backs me up 100% with his extraordinary discovery that preempts mine. That's a half an hour. We're going to have a second presentation. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss the next lectures. On Roger Josip Bošković, just to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing, we're going to be scrolling through this. You can freeze frame this and flash, read this later if you want. But this has been a half an hour. I got quite excited there. I would prefer to keep my voice under control. But it has been a week since I broadcast, and I'm quite emotionally involved in this. This is extremely exciting. But of course, as scientists, we're supposed to be more Vulcan-like. Yes, Captain, this is extremely exciting. Or fascinating. All right, this is Anagalactic. We'll be right back with you with some more. Let me just scroll ahead so you see how much we have. There's something here. This is Bošković himself here, although you can see I've made it more readable. And then we're going to get to curvature, centripetal force, that's gravity, elastic space-time, and the evolute of the hyperbola. We're going to get into a whole bunch of good stuff. And Theoria Philosophiae Naturalis. I'm going to close with this quote from Roger himself in the first few pages of his book. Here's what he says. This simple theorem, which is called the Bošković curve, quite unexpectedly to me, developed into a whole work of considerable magnitude. That is exactly what happened to me 1 year ago. That I knew I was in process of discovering a new geometry, but I suspected that it was going to blow up on me and start answering questions in physics. That's exactly what it did. And that's exactly what Roger found out about his geometry. And you're going to, I'll just give you a teaser. You don't have to credit this, but stay tuned to hear the next couple of lectures, because, I won't say it. You won't believe me. But I'm going to show you what he discovered and show you the graphs and the mathematics. And not really mathematics, though. He knew the calculus both from Leibniz and from Newton. He knows how to use it just as well as they do. But his whole explanation is geometric. And it's just corroboratory to what I've already discovered, which surpasses anything that he discovered or Einstein discovered. A new geometry that explains physics and unifies the inner product and the outer product. I'll teach you what those mean. And a galactic, 4th day of February. This is a Saturday. It's been a week. I'm glad to be back. I hope you're enjoying this. I am extremely excited. And I'm going to try to keep this down to more talking like Alfred Hitchcock and just very slowly presenting facts so that you don't have to be swayed by my emotion. All right. Thank you very much.